morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Ambassador.
Good morning. Good morning, Wendy. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yes, and it's always great to see you. Always great. And I love your colors. Not just the African print, but the fact that it's nationalistic as well. Barbados is all in there. So that's great.
This is a gift to me by the Barbados Association of Vendors, Barven.
Yes,
so
we had them
I am-
on yesterday.
I am
So
proudly wearing it.
represent, and it was nicely done as well. Suits you well. Now, the Bridgetown Initiative, that name would have been called so many times now that everybody should have gone and looked up to see exactly what it's about, what it contains, and how it's going to help us as a country on the world stage.
Yes, Wendy. Well, I spoke quite a bit about the Bridgetown Initiative last year. You know, this initiative that was formed in Barbados, was embraced by CARICOM, but that Barbados has taken responsibility for really pushing it on the world stage. And I promised last year that we would do a review at the end of the year to see how much progress we would have made in 2023 in getting it implemented. Remember, in 2023, we had several bites at the cherry, really, to get it implemented. We had the spring meetings of the World Bank and the IMF in Washington. Then we had the June summit in Paris, President Macron and Prime Minister Motley, this summit for a new financial pact. Then we had the UN General Assembly in September. We had the autumn meetings of the IMF and the World Bank in Morocco, and then we had COP28 in the United Arab Emirates in early December. So at every stage, Barbados was pushing, and CARICOM, to see how we could get it implemented. And so I want to give a little report. What have we accomplished thus far?
Yes.
And what is still to be done? But just set the background. This, in a world that is increasingly dark and dismal, when it seems as if major powers have lost their mind, have lost a sense of responsibility, Barbados brought together persons to craft this initiative to respond to the plight, first of all, of poor countries, countries that are struggling with debt, with underdevelopment, also to respond to the climate crisis, to say, let us finally find a solution that can prevent the world from going the route of the global warming that will take us beyond 1.5 degrees and create tremendous problems for humanity.
Yes.
And let us try to reform. Let us see how we could reform this international order that was set in place around 1945, when many of the countries that exist today were still colonies and therefore did not get a seat at the table. Therefore, we have created a world order that is not sufficiently sensitive
To our needs.
So the Bridgetown, Barbados is really being the adult in the global room.
Okay.
And is saying, let us be responsible, let us be humane, let us be caring about our planet, but also about people. And here, we are not just issuing a call, a utopian call, as if we are God, but we have come with a very practical program to say, these are the very practical things we could do to take the world in this positive direction. And the good news is, we have made some very significant progress.
And I think if the progress is marked by nothing else, it has to be with the continuous mention of our Bridgetown Initiative in a number of the major periodicals and newspapers and so on. I mean, we've seen the initiative, we've seen Prime Minister Motley's name, we've seen Professor Avinash Prasad's name, and every time you can see 4 lines, Bridgetown Initiative. So it is constantly there. People are understanding it. People have praised the excellent piece of work which it is, because of how easily it is for other places to be able to utilize what's in that document to assist themselves as well in the whole climate fight.
Yeah, well, what part of the brilliant thinking of the Bridgetown Initiative is to link the climate fight with the fight against poverty and underdevelopment. And for example, the Bridgetown Initiative has focused on helping the most intensely affected debt-stressed countries. And so it has urged the IMF, for example, to operationalize the new funding mechanisms to respond to the plight of the most vulnerable and the most debt-stressed. The Resilience and Sustainability Trust, the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. And it has urged that many more resources be put into these programs and be made available to developing countries. And yes, many have benefited, including Barbados. In fact, Barbados was the first country to be allocated funds from the IMF's new Resilience and Sustainability Trust, right?
Yes.
And these are funds that you get at 2.25% interest, repayable over 20 years with a 10-year moratorium. So it is responding to countries that are struggling with debt. Also, we have pushed under the Bridgetown Initiative the idea of debt pause clauses in all lending instruments. So we have said to the World Bank, the Inter-American Development, all the multilateral banks, and to major countries, put into when you lend money, especially to developing countries, you put in a clause that says, if that country is hit by a natural disaster, a pandemic, that all debt repayments are paused for 2 years.
Yes.
And this idea has been taken up. The UK is now doing it, France is doing it, the World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, the European Investment Bank.
So we've not just laid the way for our fellow CARICOM brothers and sisters, but we're showing the world.
Countries all over the world.
We're showing the world.
And then we have to give a lot of credit to Professor Avinash Prasad, because a major component of the Bridgetown Initiative was to get the Loss and Damage Fund under the climate change agenda. For years, we were talking about this Loss and Damage Fund, but the Bridgetown Initiative said, look, we have to get this operationalized. Professor Prasad did a lot of work leading up to COP28 and at COP28, and finally, the Loss and Damage Fund is operationalized. We are saying that it should be at the level of at least $100 billion every year. At COP28, they pledged about $800 million. So we still have a long way to go. But finally, it is operationalized. And finally, countries like Barbados and other Caribbean countries that suffer climate-related disasters, whether it is sargassum, whether it's a hurricane, whether it is intense drought, will be able to get reconstruction grants, not loans, grants to help them rebuild after the disaster. See? Yeah. So in several areas, you can see where the Bridgetown Initiative is actually gaining traction and is being gradually implemented.
And that must be well pleasing to those who were part of actually drafting that Bridgetown Initiative, and that's something that we oftentimes take for granted. We see things come into action and we assume, oh, it didn't take a lot. But the architects behind it would have taken their time, and they would have looked at all the possibilities. They would have looked at where we need to be, because it's not just for the now and to deal with climate and poverty reduction, but it's also looking toward a future for us within the region.
Yes, well, Barbados had initially taken that initiative to bring to Barbados, remember in July, August 2021, some of the leading thinkers on these issues. We brought them here, and so the complex of ideas was put together right here in Barbados. But then we introduced it to CARICOM, and CARICOM bought into it, and so it's part of CARICOM's official policy as well. So when we go to these different events, whether it be the IMF World Bank meetings, COP, UN General Assembly, all CARICOM countries are pushing it. But of all
we've heard it from Irfan.
Yeah, everybody is pushing it. But Barbados has assumed special responsibility for it. And in 2024, this year, we are going to have enhanced opportunities to really push it. For example, Barbados is assuming the chairmanship of the group of the so-called vulnerable 20, the V20, just like how we have the G20.
G20, yes.
Well, there's also, the G20 is the most powerful countries in the world. The V20 are really the most vulnerable, but it's not 20, it's actually something like 68. So of the poorest and most vulnerable countries, we are assuming chairmanship of that group in May of this year. So we will have, as chairman of the V20, 68 countries, we will be able then to deploy that strength, that collective strength, to push the Bridgetown Initiative.
Okay.
We are also chair of UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. Remember, we had the 15th UNCTAD in Barbados in 2021. We assumed the chairmanship. And one of the things that we said under the Bridgetown Initiative is that the multilateral trading system has to support this transformation for developing countries. And so we are using our chairmanship to host in Barbados in March of this year, UNCTAD's, it's a global forum on the global supply chain, right? Because one of the things we find, yes, we set these goals for renewable energy projects and so forth, electrification of our vehicles and all of that, but quite often we can't even get these materials on the world market, right? Because we are shut out, or the global supply chain doesn't support us.
When we come back after the break, we'll discuss that a bit more, and in terms of how Barbados can help lead the conversation and the things that are happening now to create some breaks in that supply chain.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
And we're back with Ambassador Comissiong, where we're going to be continuing our conversation this morning. Before we went off, we were talking about UNCTAD and the whole supply chain issue. But some of the things which CARICOM has been doing will help to stave off some of that international pressure should those transshipment links continue to weaken. Now, Ambassador Comissiong, we had set up situations with Guyana, with Suriname, where we're looking to trade with each other a lot more because, one, we were trying to keep our import bill from extra-regionally down, and also we have a lot that we can share with each other. And you would have been a part of a number of these discussions and negotiations, which would have been signed on to help this, go smoothly. How are things going to ramp up for 2024?
Yes, well, we got the wake-up call during the COVID-19 pandemic when there was a real scare that everybody in the world was scrambling for all kinds of things and that we could be shut out. We are a small region. And so the ships that bring the food, for example, could stop coming. So it was a wake-up call, and CARICOM decided to act. So yes, we are going to try to be much more self-sufficient, self-reliant in the Caribbean. One of the things I'm very pleased with is the agricultural production project, the 25 by 25, to reduce the regional food import bill by 25% by the year 2025. That is going well. The lead president, President Ali, is reporting that countries are really doing what they're supposed to do. We are increasing our food production. And, you know, I'm hoping that our food terminal at Lears, that in this year, that construction will actually start on that, because we have this idea of Barbados being like a hub.
Yes.
And we will be bringing in foodstuffs from Guyana, Suriname, re-exporting to other countries in the region. And also this brilliant idea that Prime Minister Motley really pushed this idea that countries like Guyana, Suriname, Venezuela are outside of the hurricane belt. And if a hurricane hits the Caribbean, you know, and destroys our agricultural production, why don't we put some of our agricultural production outside of the hurricane belt? And for example, when we went to Venezuela a few months ago, Venezuela offered Barbados 50,000 acres of land, agricultural land, just you know. So this is an idea that kind of has taken root. Of course, we're still working to actualize it. I mean, we have done some of it with, for example, the black belly sheep in Guyana and so forth. And also on the industrial front, CARICOM finally woke up that we must have an industrial policy. So we set up a prime ministerial subcommittee on industry headed by Suriname, and they are now working on how to flesh out that. But it's crazy that CARICOM was in existence for so long, but we did not really have a structure focused on on developing industry regionally. We now have that. So yes, we have to focus on both fronts. We have to focus on what we can do on the international front, and this is why the UNCTAD conference that we will be hosting on the global supply chains and how developing countries could be guaranteed access to global supply chains, but also what can we do for ourselves within our region.
And now let's look at how we're going to be able to translate some of these things, because we're going to need some funding still to do it. And some of the things which have been created and put in place are things like the debt for climate swap, some other initiatives. How do you see them panning out as we go into 2024?
Well, Barbados is not only talking the talk, but is walking the walk. Because as Barbados pushes the Bridgetown Initiative and all of the different ideas under the Bridgetown Initiative, Barbados is also taking concrete action to show how some of these things can be actualized. So, for example, we are not just asking for increased access to funding for climate projects from the international world. We are actually setting up in Barbados a blue-green bank, right? The Barbados government is putting in 10 million US. The Green Climate Fund is putting in money. The Latin America. Is this
money going to be matched or more than?
I'm not sure the exact quantities, but it is expected the bank will be established this year here in Barbados, and that it will leverage something like $500 million. So this will be money to do things like create stronger housing stock that can withstand hurricanes, hurricane resilient roofs. How do we transition to electric vehicles? This will be money to help Barbados do those kinds of things. Also, you mentioned the debt for climate swap. Again, walking the walk. We have embarked on these initiatives, these very creative initiatives where, for example, during the course of last year, we had this debt for nature swap, where with the IDB, we joined together with the IDB, Inter-American Development Bank, and the Nature Conservancy, where, for example, the Nature we purchased some of our debt, and gave us a lower interest rate, but on condition that we use the savings to do marine protection projects. So because of that initiative, we now have $50 million that rather than going to a bank to pay off debt, we can now use to protect the marine environment of Barbados. And this year, we are doing a debt for climate swap, where similarly, we will retire some of our debt at lower interest rates, but we will exchange it for debt that carries a lower interest rate on condition that we use the savings for climate projects in Barbados. So, as I said, that is an example of a country that is not only preaching to the world or saying to the world, you must do X, Y, and Z under the Bridgetown Initiative, but we are also setting an example by doing concrete things
And
ourselves. Yes.
We're leading the way. And that's always good to know. And you remain there in the vanguard of it all, ensuring that Barbados's place at the table is not only known, but that in terms of helping to guide these policies through, you continue to give them your expertise as well. What are you looking forward to most in 2024 where CARICOM and its work is concerned?
Well, first of all, on the Bridgetown Initiative, I remain so focused on this because I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud that our country is actually trying to be the adult in what seems to be a very childish global community now, you know, and it's trying to keep the world focused on the serious.
As they say, we're punching above our weight.
We're punching way above our weight, and CARICOM embraces that vision as well. But in terms of me personally, I must tell you that I've been given the hot potato. I've been made in CARICOM. I've been made chair of the CARICOM Intergovernmental Task Force on bringing about freedom of movement.
Yes.
So I'm chairing the task force, and the mandate of the task force is to operationalize this decision, this historic decision, that we will have full freedom of movement, and that we will put it in place by the end of March this year. When I say put it in place, make the major changes to the revised treaty. Obviously, there will be a transition. There'll be a transition period. You know, everything won't happen automatically at the end of March. But that's a great responsibility I have been given, and we will need to talk about this more, Wendy, because
on our next
I don't think our Caribbean and Barbadian people have quite realized that this is in train.
Yeah, and it is. And the train will not stop people, but we will stop our conversation with the ambassador for this morning. Always great, always enlightening, always good to know how we're looking to move the region forward together.
Morning, morning,